Hey guys, it's Marley and welcome to my November reading wrap up. Before we get into the wrap up, be sure to subscribe to my channel down below if you have not already for weekly bookish videos from me. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about all the books I read in November. Little spoiler alert, little preview. This was my best reading month of the year in terms of the most books read. So that's really exciting. And going off of that, let's just do a little overview as always, looking at all of my stats for the month really quickly. So as I said, I had my highest books read with 12 books this month. My average has been 8 throughout the year. You'll see, or you might have already seen, the reason for that was my reading vlog this month where I read the shortest books on my TBR. So that definitely helped me out. For pages read, it was about 3,796. Hours listened, 7.5. You guys know I never listen to audiobooks, but I finally did listen to a few audiobooks this month. So we have an hours listened. And then average rating was 3.7, which is not amazing, but you know, books acquired 2, own voices 2. The graph for genres is kind of all over the place. I guess it makes sense if you read more books. They were from more different genres, but the most we had was fantasy with 4 books. Then we did have 3 thrillers, then 1 contemporary, 1 horror, and 1 romance. For format, we had the most from physical reads, 7 physical books, and then 3 ebooks, and then, as I said before, 2 audiobooks. And I'm not quite used to reading audiobooks, so when I put in the hours listened, I don't know if 7.5 is accurate because I listened to them at 1.5 times speed. I tried to make that number accurate, but I don't know. For audience, we did have a perfect split between adult books and YA books, which is the perfect way to summarize my reading, I feel like. For author gender, we did read mostly from females, as always, but we had a few male authors in there. For author status, of whether I've read from them before or not, we did have 7 repeats and only 5 new to me authors, although 5 is still kind of a lot of new authors to read from, so that's good. And then for year published, we have a wide variety here. Most of the books I read were more newer releases from 2023, 2022, and 2021. And then the rest were a little bit more backlisted, with the oldest one being from 1872. Don't see that every time. Okay, now let's get into the book reviews. As always, starting out with my lowest rated, leading up to my highest rated, so you want to stick around for that. So the lowest rated book I had this month was a 2.5 star. I am not a very harsh rater, so that is kind of a bad rating for me, and that was King of Fools by Amanda Foody. This is the second book in the Shadow Game series, which the first book of that series is called Ace of Shades. I read that book earlier this year, gave it a 4-star, quite liked it, and decided to continue with the series, but with this low rating, I'm kind of regretting it a little bit. This is a YA fantasy series about this teenage girl named N, who is from like this nice little town, whatever. Her mom ends up going missing when she goes to the Sin City, New Reyes. I always forget the name of it. So N decides to follow in her mom's footsteps to try and find her. The only name she knows for help is Levi. So she finds this guy Levi in the Sin City. He ends up being like a gang member, or a gang leader rather. And so she gets tied up in this world of gangs and like street lords. And there also is magic in this world. So the magic system is kind of cool, where like everybody has their own talents depending on your heritage. So some people might be good at healing. They might have like fire power, like all these different talents or powers that might be good at dancing, stuff like that. And there are also these things called volts, which is like their currency. So some people's powers is, you know, making volts, for example. Anyways, she just gets wrapped up in like the politics of this world. Along with Levi, our other main character, who I said, who has his own kind of storyline going on, but he's also trying to help N, and the romance of the series is the 2 of them. Okay, as I said, I kind of liked the first book and how it ended. It kind of got a little bit darker than a typical YA. Our main characters are kind of morally gray. As you can imagine, they're dealing with some dark stuff, gangs and all that kind of stuff, violence, you know what I mean? And one of the things I liked about this book was the female power female empowerment with N, who was kind of starting this girl gang. And I really like those characters. I like those moments. Unfortunately, we also see from Levi's point of view. on paper, he maybe seems like he would be interesting. He's kind of giving Kaz Brecker, but it's not quite delivering how I think Amanda Foody wants it to. Like, I find his character quite annoying, and it's hard for me to root for him. It's hard for me to root for the romance between him and N when I don't really enjoy his character. And I felt that a little bit in the first one, but it got a lot worse in this one. Something I did kind of like about this book is we got a new point of view, which is Jack, and he is Levi's right-hand man, his best friend. So seeing a different point of view and some different characters was nice, but just by the end, I was unhappy with a few choices that were made by Amanda Foody. Some things that happened with the characters upset me. I also started to find it hard to root for these characters who are so morally gray, and when there's these violence and killings happening, I think the reason normally our protagonists are good is because it's easier to root for, you know, good people. So it started to get a little bit hazy for me with that, of whether like I actually liked these main characters that we're supposed to root for. Another main thing of my low rating, honestly, like I don't even want to call this a bad book. It's just that my experience was not good because it's over 600 pages, or it's around 600 pages, which is kind of long for a YA book, and it should not have been that long. I was losing interest constantly. It was a battle for me to get through this, and I think it took me like half the month to read it, and I would put it down and I would pick up another book, like one of the other ones we're going to talk about, and then I would come back to this, read maybe a couple more chapters, and then I would have to put it down and pick up a different book, putting me in obviously a reading slump. So that is why this is my least favorite book of the month, and probably one of my least favorites of the year, because I kind of differentiate bad books or low rated books in two different ways for me. A book might be low rated because of the reasons like this one, where it was so hard for me to get to because it was so boring and not a quick read. Another reason is if it's like bad in terms of the content and that it's offensive. This one wouldn't be that. It would be more of the hard to read, too boring one. Okay, now that that's out of the way, we go into my 3-star reads. So first of all, we have Carmilla. This is by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. This is a old, like kind of classic vampire. It came out before Dracula, but it is very, very similar to Dracula. But I'm gonna say maybe too similar, in that I don't necessarily think you need to read it or would like it if you've already read Dracula. It's also the female Dracula, by the way. Our main vampire is a woman named Carmilla, and it's kind of just a vampire story similar to Dracula, where we are seeing this main character who is visited by this mysterious woman when she's young, and then when she's older there start to be these like killings or something like that, people being drained of blood, clear signs of having their blood sucked. I don't remember. It was quite a short book, but there just wasn't a lot to it. I wasn't that interested, again, because as that old classic writing that I don't love, but then also the story was not really unique because I already know the story of Dracula. So for its time, it would be great. Like if you haven't read Dracula yet, then maybe it's for you. But as someone who's already read that, I'm kind of like, okay, so it's just Dracula, but it's a woman. Okay, next up we have Escape Room by Maren Stoffels, and this was the first audiobook that I read this month. I decided to do the audiobook because that's all my library had, and this was one of the books I read in that Shortest Books reading blog. This is a YA thriller about these 4 friends who end up going to this escape room, but then something sinister happens where the person like running the escape room actually like locks them in for real and is kind of like torturing them, and has, I think it's like this sort of secret that they want one of the characters to reveal, or like the reason they're all getting locked up is because of something one of our main characters has done. And so it's like a mystery of trying to figure out like which of these 4 friends is the reason they're all being locked up in this actual escape room. We're hearing from all of the different points of view. I did really like the audiobook because it was a full cast of narration, I think is what people call it. So that was quite fun to read. It was super, super quick to read this in just a couple hours. Unfortunately, it was still kind of cringy. It was one of those more like cringe YA. Sometimes YA is good, not cringy. This one was definitely cringe. The twists and the kind of reveals were not shocking to me. So maybe good for, you know, a younger audience, but I am not going to be going around recommending this. But it was a fun experience to read an audiobook or listen to an audiobook because I never do. Okay, then I finally finished the Death Note manga. I have this huge collection that I've been working on for I think like 2 years. I've talked about it here and there on my channel whenever I pick up a couple of the volumes, but I finally read like the chapters that would be included in the final volume, and I did give it 3 stars. I know the rest of the series I was giving like 5 and 4-star ratings, but like my man Light, I just hate to see what happened to him, you know, and that's like not a good opinion to have. That's like the wrong opinion to have because Light is evil. If you've read this, you know what I mean? But I just didn't like to see his downfall. And you can judge me if you want, but that was just kind of upsetting to see. And I don't know, maybe it's because I've been dragging this whole series out. I was kind of ready to be done with it, and I didn't feel like the final volume was all that special. I think it was a little bit different from the anime, but I actually don't really remember the ending of the anime that much. Yeah, so don't have a lot to say about this. I would probably recommend the anime more than the manga though. I feel like overall my experience was better with that. All right, my last 3-star of the month was Family of Liars by Lockhart. This is the prequel to We Were Liars, which is a YA kind of mystery contemporary book that I read a couple years ago now, I think, and I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It is basically about this girl who is from this like rich privileged family. They actually own like I think a whole island. They go there every summer, her and her cousins, and then I think the one year they bring also this friend and he's like her love interest or whatever. Then this accident happens and then there's like a mystery surrounding it. It's hard for me to like remember all the details of that, also because I don't want to reveal anything. But essentially in this prequel, we're following the parents of those characters. So there is 3 girls, which were the mom to our main character in We Were Liars, and then the aunts. It's actually the aunt who is the main character in this book. We're just following one of their summers that they had when they were all teens, and they would go to this island for the summer. And again, some boys end up coming along, some of their other friends and their cousins. So we have like a whole group we're following. And of course there's drama and things going on. We again have kind of an unreliable main character. She is addicted to drugs and has some different issues going on, and there's again, you know, some death and some dark themes going on. I only gave it a 3-star because even though I really enjoyed the writing, just like the first one, it was really quick for me to read. The reason I liked the first one so much was that really devastating plot twist. It had a major reveal that just really got to me. I was really affected by it emotionally, and this one just sort of lacked that. I didn't find the twists to be, I don't really find there to be many twists, honestly. So it was enjoyable. So if you liked the first one, I honestly probably would recommend you check this out, but it definitely was not as good as the first one and not really needed, honestly. Now we are moving on to my 4-star reads of the month. First up, we have Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo. I know, I finally read this. This is the most recent release in the Grishaverse series. So if you don't know, we have the Shadow and Bone trilogy, we have the Six of Crows duology, and then we have, I guess this is being called the King of Scars duology. And I'm not gonna explain the whole background because that's a lot to go through, but just know that this is a YA fantasy story in this kind of high fantasy world where there's all these people with different powers, essentially. We're following characters that we know from the first 2 series, and that is the most intriguing thing for me, is we're following some of my favorite characters actually from those first 2 series. So that is fun. I didn't love this one. Again, it's kind of long, and this is one that took me a while to get through, but at the end of the day, I was pretty happy with where the story ended and where all of our characters' stories ended up being. I would be totally happy if this is the last book in the series though. Like, I do feel like it's gone on long enough. I'm content with where our characters ended up. As I said, I feel like there was a little bit of unnecessary like fan baiting, or that's not what it's called. When they do things to appease fans, I'm blanking on the word for that. But we had like other characters kind of popping in for little cameos that were not really relevant. So I'm like, okay, like it's getting to be a little too much, you know? If there are more books, I will probably read them. But yeah, it's like I had a good time, but I'm kind of ready to put this series to rest. Also, the death in this book, that is one thing I am upset about, is a big death that happens in this. I feel like it was kind of unnecessary. I was spoiled about it from the TV show anyway, but I didn't love that part. All right, another book I read, a little bit different for me, a little out of my comfort zone, was She and Her Cat by Makoto Shinkai and Maruki Nagakawa. This was like a collection of vignettes about these women and their pet cats, which again I read for that short book reading blog, and I am totally a cat person. Actually, I don't know if you can really see my sweater, but it does say Meowie Christmas and it has a little cat on it. So we're repping the crazy cat lady, but if you also love cats like me, I think you would like this book. As I said, we're following I think it was 3 different stories of these women and their cats, and you're hearing from the cat's point of view. You're having their inner dialogue and seeing their lives as these cats in this neighborhood, as all the stories do interconnect and all the cats are kind of like friends. It's very sweet. Like, I had to give it at least 4 stars. I wasn't like obsessed with it where it was a 5-star read, but it's so cute. It's so interesting to see the take this author had on like how cats are, and you know, of course the people we're following too have pretty like relatable, emotional kind of, but also heartwarming things going on. So it's probably like a feel-good story, and you know, definitely recommend for any cat lovers out there. All right, then I read a thriller called The Arrangement by Kiersten Modglin. Now I think she's a pretty popular thriller author, but this is the first book I've read from her. Yeah, I give it 4 stars. This was a wild ride, or well, the second half definitely was. We're following this couple. They've been married for years. I think they have some kids. Things are kind of stagnant though with their marriage. There's definitely some issues going on, and so they decide to come up with this arrangement where they get to cheat on each other once a week, and they don't tell each other anything about it, but like, it's like a little way for them to like act out or whatever, or sleep with someone else to spice up the relationship and kind of get some jealousy going, stuff like that. I don't know, not a good idea obviously, but this just leads to so much other stuff happening. Like, I don't know how to describe the rest of the plot from there, but as you can just imagine, this is going to take a dark twist. There's going to be maybe some murder, some death, a lot of twists. A lot of twists, and I love twists, right? So that's why I was a big fan of this. I think if you're someone who doesn't love twist on twist on twist and doesn't like when they're like too crazy and too unrealistic, this might not be for you. But if you really want that, I guess they're called popcorn thriller, like just want that entertainment, this will provide you with that. And this is the second audiobook that I read this month, so I would recommend the audiobook. It was a full cast narration again, or at least for the 2 main characters who have points of view, the husband and the wife. You'll read it in one sitting, I think. Like, it's quite entertaining. It is apparently a series though, and I'm still on the fence if I want to continue. I kind of am fine with this being just a one-off. I don't really read many like thriller series. That's not really something I'm that interested in, but of course if you have read it, or if you have read the rest of the series, let me know your thoughts and if you would suggest it or not. Then I read Under One Roof by Hazelwood. I think this is the last of the short books that I read. This is a novella, of course, from Hazelwood's Steminist novella collection. This was really cute. Again, I gave it 4 stars. So it is a roommates romance. That's kind of the trope. And also enemies to lovers. I think she does that every time. Basically, we have our main character who inherits this house that this guy also inherits. So they are forced to share this house. They both insist on living in it, so they're forced to be roommates while they figure out some sort of solution. There's of course some miscommunication in there, but they eventually start to develop like a friendship as they are forced to spend time together. Forced proximity, love that. And yeah, it was just really cute. And it was kind of nice to read a romance novella because there was no third act drama. Like, if you don't like the third act drama, you don't have to worry about it. It's literally just the lead up and them getting together, which is my favorite part of romance. So I did quite like that. The only thing is, this concept of like both inheriting a house was very Twice Shy by Sarah Hogle. Like, that's literally the concept of that book. So I didn't love that it felt like, I don't know, maybe she copied it. I don't know. I guess people have the same ideas it's gonna happen, but I don't know. Okay, moving on. Then our last 4-star read was The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater. I know this didn't win in the polls for my TBR. If you watched it, I had my followers pick the books that I read. This didn't win in the poll, but then I had extra time. I had extra time to read, so I did still read it. It is the 4th and final book in the Raven Cycle series. So that's, you know, the Raven Boys being the first book. I have been reading this series over the last few months and really enjoying it. The first book was a 5-star. The rest have been like 4, 4.5. with this being 4. So clearly I really enjoyed it, but it was a slightly disappointing finale for me for a few reasons. So the general basis of this series is it's a YA like fantasy paranormal series, and the plot is like really weird. It's a very vibey book, so that's why I think you don't hear a lot of people getting into details about the plot. But just as a basis, we're following Blue, who comes from a psychic family, and then this group of boys who go to this private school in town. Our main guy, Gansey, is on a quest to find this missing, long-lost Welsh king because he is known to like grant, it's like a myth that if you find him, he'll grant you a wish. And there's some more backstory to it. But anyways, in each book, this world just kind of develops more and more, and it becomes like more paranormal, and you find out about more and more magic in the world with the ley lines, and like each character has their own kind of magic and reason that they're special. In this book, it continues, like more stuff is introduced, but I have to say my favorite characters of the group are Blue and Gansey. And similar to the second book in the series, it kind of focuses more on the other 2 characters, Ronan and Adam, a little more than I would have liked. I would have liked to see Blue and Gansey a little bit more, especially their romance. I still do love Ronan and Adam though. Like, I feel weird that I don't like their scenes as much because I actually do really like them. At one point I used to hate Adam, but now I love him. And it does get queer. Like, I don't want to spoil, but like, I don't think people talk about the fact that like this series does have some queer rep, if you're wondering about that. But I just prefer when it focuses more on Blue and Gansey. So that's one of the reasons I was like a little bit disappointed by this, is because we had so much focus on Ronan. And clearly Miss Stiefvater loves that man, because I'm pretty sure there's a sequel series that's following Ronan. So clearly Maggie like loved his character and wanted to delve more into his character. I'm still on the fence if I'm gonna read that. I think I won't rush to it, but maybe one day I will pick up those books. Another thing is I just feel like things got wrapped up way too easily in this book. Like, I have to say that it just got wrapped up too easily, and I wanted more from it, even if it was longer, if we could have focused more on different characters. I don't know, there was just something a little bit off from it. But I did overall love this series. I think it's so funny, it's so unique, so I definitely do recommend it. But yeah, 4 stars. All right, 2 books left. Next up we have Murder in the Family by Cara Hunter. So this is a murder mystery kind of thriller. I haven't heard too many people talk about it, but I think it's more popular in the UK. It's like a British thriller, but it's told in a really cool way where it's all like multimedia elements. So as you can see, a lot of it is like the scripts, or I think there was a photo there I just went past, or text messages or emails or like articles. So if you like when stories are told like that, definitely check it out. I don't know if I said it, give it 4.5 stars. Essentially, we're following this true crime show that Netflix is putting on. There's been like multiple seasons of this show, but in this season, they're focusing on a case where the director actually was involved. So his stepdad was murdered when he was a young boy, like 5 or something. It was never solved. So now he's like a full-grown man, he's like 30, and he's like, let's investigate this. They get a whole cast of people to look into this for the TV show. So we have some detectives, some lawyers, journalists, people that might have some good insight into this, right? Every episode we're seeing the script and seeing these people talk about all this evidence they found. In between, we're seeing text, emails, all those other media that I mentioned. It was just so fun for murder mystery lovers because there's so many different suspects you can go through, so many different theories and pieces of evidence that they're having, and we have a lot of twists. Unfortunately, we got to remove the 0.5. I believe it was because I guessed the killer right off the bat, but that's okay because it's about the journey, and I had such a fun time reading this. It was just so fun, so quick to read. I think it was like a day that it took me. This is definitely an underrated release from the year that I would recommend you guys pick up if you're into the genre. I think you'll just have fun with it. And if you do read it, let me know if you guessed the killer or not. So then we have my last book. I feel like I've been talking so long. My only 5-star read for the month. You know it's gonna be Lisa Jewell. You know it's gonna be my queen, Lisa Jewell, my like favorite thriller author. Her release from this year called None of This Is True. Such a good time. I think I read this in a day. I think I always read Lisa Jewell's books in a day. Just so quick, so addicting. In this, we are following a podcast host. What even is the beginning of this plot? can I remember? She meets this woman, and this woman is like, oh, I'm kind of trying to like restart my life. Like maybe you could follow me as part of your podcast, because this woman's podcast is all about like female empowerment and like females that have like done really cool inspirational stuff. So she's like, maybe you can follow my life as I kind of get my life on track. And so she's like, sure. So it's basically something in my eye. Hold on. This one woman learning about this other woman's life, all the tragedy that has kind of surrounded it. And we're seeing from both of their points of view. Oh yeah, and they're birthday twins. That doesn't really matter, but that's what it says in the description. Yeah, the description's pretty vague, and like I see why. Like that's honestly all I can say about the plot, but I just really recommend it. So many twists. I feel like some of them were ones that you could pick up on, some that you could definitely guess, but then it just went to just so many different crazy directions that I had to give it 5 stars. Like I had to. And Lisa Jewell is also just so good at the character work. Like you're not just reading for the plot, you're also reading for the characters and these kind of deep things going on as well. So highly recommend. So all right, overall a pretty successful reading month. Let me know if you have thoughts on any of these books, and follow me on Goodreads to keep up with my reading in between videos. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day or rest of your night, and I will see you next time. Bye.